Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila with another story for you. Our story today is called The Gardener's Fortunate Mistake. Well, Mother, and she came running to the door and she called out to Jean Marie. She said, Jean Marie, come quick. There's a surprise here for you. Well, everybody loves a surprise. So Jean Marie had run from the backyard and she came inside. And Mother said, Your aunt and uncle are here. Go in the living room. They have a surprise for you. Well, Jean Marie, she went around the corner into the living room, and there sat her Aunt Evangeline and her Uncle Howard side by side on the couch, and they were smiling broadly at her. Well, she went over and she said, Hi, Auntie. Hi, Uncle. I'm so glad you've come over to visit us. Well, all the time her eyes were looking around to see what that surprise might be, but she couldn't see anything. Well, her aunt and uncle, they noticed that look of expectation on her face, and they just smiled because they could tell. She didn't want anybody to know that she was looking for whatever the surprise was. Well, Auntie, she scooted over and she patted the couch between her and Uncle Howard, and she said, Come sit down. So Jean Marie did. She snuggled right up between the two of them, and they talked for just a few minutes. And then Auntie reached down over the side of the couch and she pulled up a basket. And out of the basket, she pulled a little tiny soft ball of fur and set it in Jean Marie's lap. Jean Marie went, How did you know I love kittens? She picked up the little kitten and she held it ever so softly against her cheek. And she talked to it and she looked at it. Well, that kitten had little black paws and then white legs and that. So she named the kitten Mittens. Well, Mittens lived up to Jean Marie's expectations. She was feisty and fun and just a pleasant little kitty to have. She did have a few what mothers might say weren't the best of habits, but she loved to climb just like a monkey. And the one thing that she loved to climb was the dining room curtains and the bedroom drapes. She would just climb right up to the top of them, and then she would go down the other side. The other thing that she sometimes liked to do was she would climb up and get on the windowsill, and if the window was open with the little toes on her paws, she would grab on to the window screen and she'd climb up that. But when she would get part way up, she must have looked down outside, and oh my, it was a long ways down. And she'd hang on tight, and she would sit there and she would cry until somebody came and saved her off the window screen. But she would just do it again some other time. Well, she seemed to know, Mittens did, when Jean Marie was supposed to get ready for bed. And Jean Marie liked to give her kitten a hug before she went to bed. Well, Mittens thought that that was playtime. So as soon as Jean Marie got close enough to reach out to pick her up, she would roll over and run as fast as she could, and she would hide under the sofa. Well, she knew Jean Marie would try to come get her. Jean Marie would get on her knees, and she would look under there, and she'd stick her hand under there to grab Mittens. But Mittens would go out the other side as fast as she could. Well, Mittens would play that way for some time, and Jean Marie thought it was fun, too. Finally, Miss Mittens must have realized, indeed, it was time to go to sleep, because she was probably tired, that she would come so that Jean Marie could pick her up and give her her love before she went to bed. Well, Jean Marie would go and fill her food dish so she could have her supper. And then Jean Marie went right to bed. Well, when Mittens got done eating, she would go to Jean Marie's room and she would lay down just like a watchdog would, right beside the bed. A whole year passed, and Mittens was now a full-grown cat. And a pretty one, too. She was Siamese, and she was white and black and beautiful. And she still was pleasant and loved to play. Well, wasn't too long after this that the missionary family, which was Jean Marie's parents, they were going to go on a vacation. But what was to be done about Mittens? Well, the decision was made that yes, Mittens would have to stay there on the mission compound. But Mother and Dad made arrangements for her to stay with a friend of theirs there on the mission. The gardener who worked for the missionaries, he had been told to take Mittens to these other people's house. Well, somehow he made a mistake. Whether he didn't read the note right, whether he didn't hear right, I don't know. But he thought that Mittens was supposed to go back. Yes, go back. Because sometime during that 1 year that Mittens had lived there with Jean Marie, the family had had to move into another house there on the mission compound. Well, back to the gardener. His mistake. He thought that they wanted the cat to go back to the house they had lived in. So he took it there. Well, the interesting thing was that that family had made arrangements with someone in one of the villages to have a cat, and they were expecting the cat to be delivered. So it was no surprise to them when the gardener came bringing Mittens. They didn't realize it wasn't their cat that they were supposed to get. But Mittens liked that house because that's where she had been raised. And they had 3 little children, and a mom and a dad, and they all played with Mittens and loved Mittens. Well, the weeks of the missionaries' vacation were going on, and one morning, the mother in the house where Mittens was staying, she got up and she was going to go to the kitchen. Well, their house, you had to walk through the living room to get to the kitchen. Well, as she got out in the living room, it was early morning, she saw something on the floor. And she thought there hadn't been anything on the floor the night before. So she decided to go investigate. And when she got closer, she jumped back in horror. There, laying in the middle of her living room floor, was a cobra, which is a very poisonous snake. But she watched the cobra for a little bit. And generally, if people get anywhere close to a cobra, they lift their head off the ground where they had been crawling in the dirt. They lift their heads up like this. They call it a hood, their head, because it looks like a hood. And that puts them up higher. And when the person gets close enough, they jump out and bite them. And of course, then they're poisoned. But this one wasn't moving. Mother quickly retraced her steps to the bedroom, and she woke up Father and she said, "Come quick, there's a cobra in the living room." Well, Father did come very quickly, and he from the distance saw that the cobra wasn't moving, so he got closer to investigate. And do you know what he saw? The head of the cobra was chewed off of that snake body, and the cobra was dead. Well, not too far away from that dead snake sat you-know-who, Mittens. And she was sitting there licking her paws and looking as pleased as she could be. Well, of course, that family, the very first thing they did, probably before even they got rid of that snake, they and their children knelt down there in the living room and thanked God for giving them a cat that protected them and knew how to kill a snake. Well, it wasn't long till the missionary family got back from vacation, and Jean Marie, of course, was very anxious. That family where Mittens was staying was surprised one day when the gardener of the missionaries came knocking at their door, and he said, "Oh, ma'am, I've made a mistake. That cat I brought here wasn't supposed to come here. He was supposed to go to the people down the street. I have to bring it to them. Where's Mittens?" So the family went and got Mittens. They were sad, but they knew that pretty soon the other people would come with the cat was really supposed to be theirs. And they thought, this was a fortunate mistake, because they knew that that snake had crawled into their house the day before, and it had probably hidden under one of the beds or under some of the furniture or in a closet or something. And then when night came, it came out. And that's when Mittens had killed it. But if Mittens hadn't been there, any one of that family could have been bitten and died. Well, the gardener quickly took Mittens back where she was supposed to have gone. And then it wasn't long, indeed, till that missionary family came back, and they were anxious to go get Mittens. And when they got there, of course, the whole tale of the snake in the house that they used to live in, and how that Mittens had gotten brought there by mistake, and how Mittens had been a hero and killed the snake. Well, Jean Marie was glad to know that her kitty had become a hero while she was gone. And boys and girls, do you know what? Generally, when God talks to animals, they listen. Unlike people, sometimes we don't listen when God tries to tell us things. But I think God told Mittens that that snake was there and what she should do with it, and gave her the courage to do it. And I think that purposefully the mistake was made. Not that the gardener made a mistake on purpose, but that God had him take the cat to the wrong house and then later get the message after the cat had done what God wanted him to do. He got to take him back take her back where she was supposed to go. Our God is so good. I'll see you next week, boys and girls. Bye-bye.